Hi guys, this is part 2. Hours, days, possibly months have passed since part 1 for you, but for me it's only been seconds. Very appropriate, as we're going to talk about 2 stories in the collection of short stories of J.G. Ballard, in conjunction with week 4 of Rocket Summer. 2 short stories from the early 1960s. One is almost a fairy tale. I guess you would call it a science fantasy type story. It's quite different than anything I've read by Ballard. And then one more Vermilion Sands story, probably chronologically the second one written, and probably, well, the Concentration City that I talked about last time is one of my favorites, and this other Vermilion Sands story is one of my favorites too. But first I'll go into these are both from 1962 actually. The first one's called The Garden of Time. It's, I don't know, 10, 12 stories deep in the collection. Again, if you're just seeing this one, not the others, what's prompted this is I just bought the collected J.G. Ballard ebook because it's on sale for only $1.99. So these are all stories I've read before, although some of them I don't remember that well. These I remember fairly well. And I'll put a link to MJ's post about this. Hopefully it's still for sale and you can get it from either Amazon or Kobo store, and feed your J.G. Ballard, the giant J.G. Ballard hole in your heart, which it can never truly be filled because he's gone. Although he didn't die particularly young, I really think he still was writing great books at the end of his life, which isn't always the case. I believe he died in his, 70s, I guess, early 80s. Anyway, The Garden of Time, 1962, is a short time travel story. Time dilation story, not a time travel story. It's set in a sort of fairy tale kingdom. There's a king, there's a duke, something like that. There's a royal. He's alone in a placious, gorgeous, romantic pavilion-type fantasy place, surrounded by these gardens of these, and he's there with his beautiful queen, bride, duchess, whatever. Just very opulently described, beautifully described. He's got these. They're in this garden full of these bulbs. These kind of flowers that are kind of time crystal bulbs. And if you like that kind of stuff, and what might happen if you've got a garden of flowers that do something with time, I'd recommend the story. I don't want to talk about it too much. Got to make this long enough, though. I might not even have enough stuff. The second story, I think I talked about everything mostly in the first video about Vermilion Sands. This is the second Vermilion Sands story, and again, they were published in book form as sort of a quasi-novel. Either you could call it a fix-up novel or a mosaic novel. The theme of which is just meditations on different art forms, and they all take place in this town or this resort place called Vermilion Sands, which had once been like a playground of the rich and famous, and also an artist colony, and different strange books. Different stories, different concepts, almost all around the arts. I have to close this window. I didn't realize. Little mosquitoes in my house for the last half hour. If you're type O blood, you are probably plagued by mosquitoes. Type O blood, I read, type O positive blood is mosquitoes' favorite flavor, and then the second I think is type B. So I've discovered that this year. If you've ever wondered why some people get bit to hell and other people don't, ask them their blood type. Anyway, I'm cursed with the wrong blood type that is delicious to mosquitoes, which I guess will help when Bill Gates starts loading mosquitoes with vaccines, which is something they want to do, I guess. Don't know how I got off on that, but it's pretty funny development. If that happens, I don't think it will. Anyway, so the second story, the second Vermilion Sand story, chronologically in the sequence, though when he put them together in the novel form, he didn't put them in strict chronological order. It was a series he wrote from the first one in 1956 all the way through the 70s. So maybe I'll look at the 70s ones next week, but who knows, maybe I'll get to another one later. But anyway, The 1,000 Dreams of Stellavista, which is a very well-written story. Borders on horror story, I would say. You could even see it as a movie. It's kind of think of it in terms of a cyberpunk haunted house. This couple goes to Vermilion Sands. They're looking for cheap property. This stuff's all been abandoned by the elites, the rich people. They see this house with a good deal, where they could get a good deal. First, they don't want it because it's almost too good of a deal. Like, why would anybody let this house go for, I think, $225,000 or something? And they talk about going back east, which is where I get the sense of geography that this city probably is in Southern California, or maybe some alternate Southern California, where it's close to a lot of cars coming through. It's close to Hollywood, or whatever would be the Hollywood of this dimension or this planet or wherever we are. It's terrifically vague in that sense. I really like that. Anyway, this rich couple is looking for a retirement home or something like this. The main character encounters oh man, I gotta let this. Okay, I'll pause till this thing goes by. What that was a huge water tank driving down a tiny ancient European street, because we have a lot of water issues in the neighborhood this year. I think more than normal, where people are running out of water. It's very crowded, so the occupancy rate is really high. Many of these buildings are mostly unoccupied most of the year. Some of them are Airbnbs. Some of them belong to Italians, who come in the summer. Some of them belong to people from other parts of Albania or other parts of the Balkans. They use just as we can. There's pied-à-terres, I guess, and many of them are just constantly unoccupied because there is a huge occupancy rate here. But in the summer, they're mostly full, so the city can't always accommodate the water needs. So sometimes people will resort to getting this massive water tank, which is the size of a gasoline tank, which and pumping into their building's reservoir, to kind of hold over, because they can't keep up with the city reservoirs. The city reservoirs can't keep up with the demand this time of year for these 2 months. So sometimes water will go out for a couple hours, which is fine with me because it's all part of life's rich pageant. So just a little background on life in the Balkans. Where was I? Okay, almost done. The 1,000 Dreams of Stellavista. Stellavista is the house that this couple decides to buy. It's the guy wants to buy it for a specific reason of something that the old owner, who was I think a film producer, did with the house. It's kind of a haunted house story. which I thought was pretty cool. It's very well described. The technical aspects are very well described of how someone could do this with the house and manifest a certain person's personality within the house, and how that would change how that would change the occupants of the house according to the character, and how also the house itself would change regarding who occupies it. I really enjoyed it. It's a very well written story. It's probably Concentration City is probably the one that has the most what they used to call eyeball kicks. It's just a mind-blowing concept. But Thousand Dreams and that's one I discussed last week, so that's from 1957. And The Thousand Dreams of Stellavista, this is probably, I don't know how far it is, it's one of his first really well-written stories. Very emotionally affecting, at least it was to me. With a guy who's kind of like, with a protagonist who's, to our modern sensibilities, probably not the nicest guy. But a very common kind of early 60s protagonist one might encounter in a John Updike, or who's the other guy who wrote Falconer? John Updike. Who's the other guy? Cheever. Those kind of guys. Or Robert Stone. Any of those kind of writers. He's that more or less that kind of character. All of these stories very much seem to be the ones I read last week and this week. Prima Belladonna, The Concentration City, Escapement, not so much The Garden of Time, but in Thousand Dreams of Stellavista. I don't have much of background. I don't know much of the details of Ballard's background at this time of his life. I know he was obsessed with America all through his writing. You can see, and you can find out where that comes from by reading his pseudo-memoir, his, I guess you would call it autofiction today, Empire of the Sun, which is about his childhood experiences in a Japanese prisoner of war camp in Shanghai, where his parents lived and worked. They didn't get out of Shanghai before the Japanese invaded and took over, and so he spent the war at whatever age, 10, 11, 12, something like that, in a prisoner of war camp. And he was very obsessed with the Americans there, and he was very obsessed with the American Allied forces and planes and things like that. And that definitely carries through in most of these stories. The Garden of Time is kind of a fairy tale kind of thing, but the other stories, especially The Concentration City, Escapement, and Thousand Dreams of Stellavista, were all very much American, very American for us. The house Stellavista in this most recent story was built by, like I said, an entertainment mogul of some kind, and the kind of whole neighborhood is famous rich Americans. Is really sort of coded as Palm Springs. Prima Belladonna, or not Prima Belladonna, but the Concentration City is definitely New York City. You can go by the street names and everything there. I was going to do some photos. I forgot to do them on the other one. So since we talked about Vermilion Sands a bit, I'll wrap this up and with some photos of a couple of the collection covers. Of course, all of these I got out of the Complete Stories of J.G. Ballard. Introduction by Martin Amis. Well, that's neither here nor there. I haven't read that yet. I don't even know if it's in the ebook edition. Vermilion Sands, like I said in the other video, was at the time it came out in '71, was really the only, at least for me, in a small town with like one mall bookstore, Reno, Nevada, Sparks, Nevada, one bookstore in a mall. Called The Little Professor. It was pretty much the only one you ever saw. And it was this one I had for years. I think it was a couple of years later when I bought it used someplace. It looked like... But there's and then there's this cover, which is the first British cover. That other cover I showed you was by Richard Powers. This is by Brian Knight. I don't know if it's going to show up well. I don't know if it's under copyright. This one is, shit. This one is by Brian Knight. The other one I showed you, the red cover, was by Richard Powers. Brian Knight did this cover, and it really, I know I probably shouldn't have done this one outside if I was going to do a glare video, but this, I think, really captures the feel of the novel. It's, you know, it's at a decadent time in a civilization like ours, where things are kind of running down, and people aren't as well off as they used to be, and the culture is not as vibrant as it used to be, and it's very interesting milieu to set a book. I really do like those stories, so I think I will either go through them. At some point, I'm going to make a list of them in order so I can read them as they were in the curated version, which would be the novel version that J.G. Ballard published in 1971, which does not print them in chronological order, but I think it'd be a fun way to read them again, and I'll get back to you on my late life impressions of the first Ballard book I ever read in my teens at some point, but not as part of this challenge. Okay, that's it for now. I have 1 or 2 books that I'm trying to read for the final week of Rocket Summer, one of which is also a fix-up novel, or, as I would say, a mosaic novel, probably more in the definition of a fix-up. It's by a British author. It was published in the 60s. I'll let you guess what it is. You don't have to go too deep. It's not that obscure. It's a pretty well-known one, but I'll leave that title for later. Hopefully I'll get to it. Thanks, BookTube.